And tonight, NBC News is reporting that the January 6th committee is coming close to a decision on making criminal referrals against the former president. The committee is considering referring Trump on 3 potential charges: conspiracy, obstruction of an official proceeding, and insurrection. The committee has yet to make a final decision on those referrals, but it plans to meet this weekend to do so and then announce its decision at a public televised meeting at 1 p.m. Eastern on Monday. But the committee has been forecasting the possibility of referring Trump to the Justice Department for quite some time now, especially after a judge in California agreed with the committee earlier this year that based on the evidence, Trump more likely than not attempted to obstruct the joint session of Congress that day. Other experts also agree. Earlier this year, former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, Barbara McQuade, wrote a model prosecution memo analyzing the potential charges against Trump. She concluded that, based on the facts already known, it appears that Trump and others could be charged with conspiracy to defraud the United States and obstruction of an official proceeding. While potential defenses would need to be assessed, there is evidence sufficient to make it probable that convictions could be obtained and sustained. Joining us now is the expert herself, Barbara McQuade, former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan and now a professor at the University of Michigan Law School. She is also an MSNBC legal analyst. Barb, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here tonight. Let's just get started with these charges. I mean, the first one, obviously, that stands out, I think, to anybody who's hearing this is insurrection. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that possibly being supported with the evidence that the public has seen thus far?
This is a big charge, Alex. In that memo I wrote back in February, I did not include this charge. This is one that is not charged often, if ever, and charging it against a former president would be a real walloper. If you look at the facts of what happened on January 6th, it makes some sense. It says it's a crime to incite an insurrection, to rile people up and send them to attack our government. And if you look at what Donald Trump did in his speech on the Ellipse and in the months preceding it by, fanning the flames about a stolen election, it seems like that's what he did. I think one of the things that gives most of us pause is that there is this First Amendment defense that I think would be played out here. There's a case called Brandenburg versus Ohio, where the Supreme Court has set a really high bar when it comes to political speech. It allows people to say things that are really fiery. It allows politicians to talk about fighting against their rivals. The standard in Brandenburg is that the government cannot make it a crime unless the person intends to incite imminent lawless action, and such action is likely based on their comments. So because of that defense, I worry about the strength of such a charge. But if you look at just the face of the charge, it absolutely fits what Donald Trump did on January 6th.
Now, none of this is set in stone. The committee is going to be meeting over the weekend to make a final decision. It sounds like from your analysis, this is probably the most controversial of the 3 that have sort of been put out there, if you will. Let's talk about the other 2, because they are both mentioned in the memo that you wrote, the prosecutorial memo earlier this year. Obstruction of an official proceeding, the thing that Doug, I want to say Jones, Doug, our QAnon friend Johnson, was convicted of today. This seems more on its face easily understood. How complex do you think this will be to prove if the DOJ starts moving forward on an indictment?
I think this one's really easy, Alex. It is obstructing an official proceeding with a corrupt intent. And so there's an official proceeding going on January 6th. There's a joint session of Congress convening for the purpose of certifying the electors, the last step between the election and Joe Biden as president. And Donald Trump tries to obstruct that. It isn't even necessary to prove that, he unleashed the mob or he conspired with the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys. It is enough that he tried to exert pressure on Mike Pence to get him to shirk his duty to be the one who is counting those ballots. And he did it with the ongoing claims of a stolen election. He said it to Mike Pence privately, and he said it to Mike Pence publicly, even in his remarks at the Ellipse. So this one strikes me as actually a rather easy one to prove. There has been some litigation going on this idea of what it takes to obstruct an official proceeding. There's some argument that says there have to be documents involved, and that's what has been argued recently in front of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, whether, simply going in and stopping, physically disrupting a proceeding is enough. But I think Donald Trump's actions, which included the submission of these certificates from fake electors from around the country, probably meets even that standard. So this one strikes me as probably the easiest of all those potential charges to prove.
And then conspiracy to defraud the United States. If two more persons conspire either to commit any offense against the United States or to defraud the United States or any agency thereof in a manner or for any purpose, and one or more of such persons do act to affect the object of the conspiracy, each shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. Your assessment of that charge and how strong it is?
I think this one is strong as well, Alex. This is what prosecutors refer to as a Klein conspiracy based on a case of that name. And it makes it a crime when a person uses some sort of fraud to disrupt the proper functioning of government. Robert Mueller charged this particular statute against the Internet Research Agency for their work when they conducted that influence campaign by buying up ads on Facebook and other social media platforms to disrupt the fair election in 2016. And so it's that same theory that Donald Trump used lies about a stolen election in an effort to subvert the lawful transition of presidential power, the way it was supposed to take place. Mike Pence shows up on January 6th. He counts the votes. They certify the president. He tried to subvert that with false claims of a stolen election. So I think this one, too, is a fairly easy charge to prove. There's some argument that when you say defraud, it means defraud out of money. So I suppose that is an argument. But that argument is not succeeded in other contexts. So I would expect this argument to also succeed here. So I would put it in second place behind obstruction of an official proceeding as likelihood of success.